is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to talk to you about today as we're continuing to watch this potential winter storm impacting much of the eastern United States. And we're also talking about a few other things as well. I've been talking to a lot of people behind the scenes. I've been talking to John. I've been talking to my buddy RJ, who goes to school with me, who is more of an expert at winter weather than I am. And I've talked to a bunch of other people about how this weather is going to be going on in the next week. So we're going to go ahead and talk about all of that today. However, before we get into the main meat of it, John brought up to my attention that there is the possibility of an Alberta Clipper system impacting the Midwest, and I do want to talk about that today to kind of start off with, and maybe take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about that, so that way we can get that out of the way. That's supposed a potential hazard. And honestly, many could see that as a warning sign for what is to come in the next week or so. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. We're going to go ahead and start by looking at this Clipper system. We're going to use the GFS run to do this right here because this is the only run that goes this far. Actually, no, we can use a few other runs. We can try the NAM first since this is going to be in a couple of days. We'll use the North American model to look at where this Clipper system is going to be coming from and how it's going to be evolving. So here's the situation that we have. Starting 24 hours out, we do see some organization and development going on in Canada, in the Rocky Mountains, those areas right there. Expect all that moisture and all of that energy to continue to feed down through much of the Midwest, starting in Iowa, going through Illinois, into parts of Missouri, Indiana, those areas, and then it'll eventually dissipate. It's this system right here. Let's go ahead and zoom into the regional sector. Right here, it starts to organize and develop, brings a lot of heavy snow to Iowa, the northern two-thirds of Illinois, into Indiana, and Ohio, and then it eventually dissipates as it moves towards the east coast of the United States. Now, I know it's a very small thing to talk about, it's a very trivial thing to talk about, but the reason I am talking about this is because this does pose a bit of a risk, and especially for those of you who are traveling on Friday, maybe even on Saturday, considering, depending on how this exits, this could cause some travel issues ahead of this potential big storm, so I wanted to get this out of the way and talk about this. So let's go ahead and take a look at this total snow accumulation. I'm not particularly expecting that much. 1 to 3 inches is generally the consensus, maybe an isolated pocket. A little bit more than that, around 5 according to the North American model. GEM RDPS a bit more widespread, 2 to 5 inches across a lot of these regions. GEM GDPS, similar situation. Europeans a little bit more conservative. GFS is a little bit more conservative, but pushes the most of the storm to the west in Nebraska and Iowa. But this is going to be a very big, this is going to be not exactly that big, but it's going to be very impactful because this goes over a lot of highways. I-55, for example, is one of them. Also I-80. This is going to be one of those I-80 Alberta Clippers that's going to really impact travel over there, and that will continue through Thursday and Friday, just as we continue to watch this system that is going to be coming up in starting this weekend. Which, by the way, pivoting towards that, I was sent an article from one of my mom's friends, Mark, a family friend of ours. Shout out to you, by the way, for sending me this. And here's what we have going on right here. All systems go for polar vortex air dumping into the United States. Remember, yesterday we did talk about this polar vortex. We talked about how a high-pressure system was going to be moving through much of the United States, and especially the eastern half of the U.S. In fact, if we go ahead and show you the Climate Prediction Center outlook for the next 8 to 14 days, let's go ahead and pull that up for you right here. 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. It is well below average right here. If we can go ahead and actually pull this up, temperature, it is well below average across Illinois, across a lot of these areas in the eastern United States. This right here is why I am very concerned, because the epicenter of this below average is in the southeastern United States and parts of the deep south like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, in the Carolinas, but the epicenter is in Tennessee, and they typically do not see temperatures that get this low below average in the regular, and this is going to be part of that Arctic blast that's going to be moving through. Precip is going to be interesting. It's a little bit below average there as a high pressure system moves through, but watch out for this above average system in the Great Plains because that could impact the Midwest, and we'll talk more about that later. But regardless of that, we have this a whole situation from the Climate Prediction Center. BAM Weather has been following this, and this is who the article is based off of. Right here, new forecasts from private weather forecasters are calling for a Arctic blast or polar vortex, and it is set to pour into the eastern half of the United States. U.S. natural gas markets responded early Friday, nearly jumping up 5% on expectations of a colder start. That's going to be mainly because demand's going to increase. You're going to see more natural gas fireplaces, natural gas stoves, and propane potentially getting purchased to prepare for this system so that way everyone can keep warm. But here's what we have going on. This is the first tweet right here. Big overnight colder trends on the EPS run, and we can go ahead and show you this right here. Let's go ahead and show you this tweet right here, and we can go ahead and kind of analyze this right here. What generally this is right here is this is what's called this is what the polar vortex is going to be generally driven, and this is from both the GFS and the European, who are calling for this very strong vortex to be over, especially Canada and the eastern United States. As we continue to move through, this starts on Thursday. It's going to continue to push further to the south, and all those areas right there. All systems go. That's another headline. Major cold polar vortex expected. And we can go ahead and kind of once again analyze this a little bit on what's going to be going on, what's going to be driving this. Well, we have a jet that's going to be moving through. We have a trough that's going to be moving through much of the United States. Let's go ahead and pull this up from the European run. Let's go ahead and get the 0Z just for context right here, and so it goes the furthest out. It won't really matter that much, but generally, here we go. Here's what we have at 500 millibars. You see a trough start to really dig down into with the jet streak going as far south as Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And what's going to result from this is a massive amount of Arctic air is going to be pushing through much of the eastern United States. You're seeing height lines around 5,400 going as far south as Kentucky, which is absolutely abnormal for this. And you don't often see this much of a trough push down unless you see a huge cold wave that's going to be moving through. If we go ahead and show you the surface, we can show you this mainly through temperature as well. And I won't exactly zoom in on any of these regions just yet unless I absolutely need to for the sake of this exercise. Actually, no, let's go ahead and use I'm pulling up the GFS just to see the precip type, just to kind of show where this high pressure system is going to be based at. It's going to form, it's going to start to organize and develop in Alberta, I believe. That is not Alberta, it's Manitoba, I believe, and then it's going to be moving into the United States. It's going to be moving through much of the U.S., and it's going to kind of sit there for quite a while, and we'll have to pay attention to that. Generally, what we have is we have a high-pressure system that's going to cause all this Arctic air to stay in place, and it's going to impact areas as far south as Florida, from what I am seeing with this, and we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to this right here. But regardless of that, we have all this going on. Natural gas prices have continued to increase because of this winter, so we're going to have to pay attention to those as well. Now let's go ahead and get into the main meat of this video and why everyone clicked on this. Okay, we talked about the cold part of it, but what's the snow going to be like? Well, we're not going to show the accumulations just yet in this video, but I do want to, because I want to show the setup. We already kind of alluded to this a little bit in terms of generally the 500 millibar setup with this. So I want to go ahead and see what's going on at 850. 850, generally you see, have a better picture of what the low pressure system is going to look like and what we're potentially going to be seeing down the road. And this is going to be impacting a lot of people. This is going to be impacting half the country, whether it is winter weather, whether it is lake effect snow, whether it is an ice storm, which I have seen a very big possibility of the rain snow line having a lot of ice in it, which for those of you tuning in the upper south, even into St. Louis and southern Missouri, southern Illinois, that is going to be a big threat, because what's going to happen is you're going to see the temperature at the surface getting just below freezing, and then just up, like say maybe 2,000 feet up or so, you're going to see a temperature layer that's a little bit above freezing, and ultimately what happens is it melts the snow. Then once it gets down to the below freezing layer, it starts to refreeze, and then it freezes on contact. That is freezing rain for you guys. Sleet is a little different. The warm layer is a little bit higher up in the atmosphere, and then it has time to reform as an ice pellet and grapple and all that stuff before falling as sleet. Snow is just freezing all the way down. Rain is just above freezing all the way down. General stuff right here. But the reason I do bring this up is because the impacts are going to be pretty large, and also we're still paying attention to a potential severe weather threat. And the 850 is why, because this does look like there's going to be quite a bit of wind shear in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and that cold front that's going to be pushing through much of the South is going to generate enough forcing, in my opinion, to generate some sort of severe weather. How exactly it's going to develop, I do not know just yet, and we'll talk more about that later in the video. But regardless, you have a lot of shear and going on over here. You have a lot of wind speeds happening. You have a very tight pressure gradient and all of that. Let's go ahead and show you the surface. Let's go ahead and show you precip with this as well. The reason I'm showing you this map is mainly just to show you how low this pressure gets in general, and that's the main reason over here. And the GFS right here has the system moving through. It has it pushing through much of Illinois, Indiana, Missouri. Pressure here is pretty interesting. According to the 0Z GFS, only gets down to 1,010 millibars, which in itself isn't particularly that strong of a system, but that pressure gradient force, the gradient between this low and the high up here in Canada, is going to be pretty interesting, and it's going to be quite the gradient, and I could see some pretty strong winds with this, especially in the snow areas, as this pushes through much of the Midwest, much of Ohio, much of the eastern United States. So we're going to have to watch that as this organizes and develops. How does this organize and how does this develop? Well, you have a good trough angle, you have good forcing, your vorticity is going to be good. And generally what you're going to start seeing is you're going to start seeing the system organizing and developing in Colorado. It's a Colorado low. It's a classic. The reason they develop over there is because they're just getting off the mountains. That vorticity is stretching out and increasing and rotating faster. Kind of like that figure skater analogy I said in yesterday's video. It's going to start organizing and developing off the Colorado and New Mexico Rocky Mountains over there. And then it's going to start to really ramp up. It's going to bring moisture up from the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to start developing its warm front and its cold front, and that's going to start pushing through much of the Midwest. And I will say heavy snow is likely with this scenario. It's not going to be like an Alberta Clipper where it's going to be a very fast-moving system. You only get 2 to 3 inches of snow. No, it's going to be relatively slow-moving. It's going to bring a lot of snow, and it's going to bring a lot of snow a lot of quickly, especially if you are north of the rain-snow line. And speaking of the rain-snow line, you start seeing that starting to develop in Missouri, in Arkansas, Tennessee, and even in the Appalachian Mountains of the Carolinas. And I have been seeing more snow possibilities of areas in eastern, North, and South Carolina getting snow. But because there's not too much information on it yet, and this is about a week out by this point, I am a little skeptical on those odds, but I will still pay attention to them, of course. Real quickly, it's generally the 12Z that's showing that. But again, I want to see a consistent trend with the models, and I want to see how this cold front develops and where it's going to develop, so that way I get a general idea of what we're potentially going to be looking at. So this snowstorm is going to be moving through much of the central and eastern United States, exits off the coast over here, and then that's pretty much what we have going on to kick off the start of next week. That's going to cause a lot of travel problems. That's going to cause a lot of issues, especially for those who are going to be going back to school. I know some colleges start this upcoming week of January. Mine does, so I'm going to have to watch this very closely. But by and large, there's two things we need to watch out with this. The first one, obviously, is the amount of snow. The second one is the amount of cold this is going to be coming with. Because on top of this snow, you have this Arctic blast moving through. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. You have an Arctic blast moving through much of the United States. You have, for example, the Deep South. This is the 12Z GFS showing its new models. By Wednesday, you're getting close to the freezing line, and I'll see if we have anything before that, and even down as far as Houston. Someone in the comments asked me about Houston getting some of that freezing temperatures. Tuesday and Wednesday morning, in my opinion, you're going to see close to freezing, but I do believe the Gulf of Mexico is going to kind of keep it above that threshold unless there's a lot of forcing from the Arctic that's going to push that over. But regardless of that, you're seeing freezing temperatures as far south as Biloxi, Mississippi, as far south as Mobile, Alabama, and we're going to have to watch that, especially in Florida where they're not used to these kinds of temperatures going forward. I know the southern Florida is going to be kind of okay in the new runs, but by and large, you're seeing a lot of situations. The European is going even more aggressive, having the entire panhandle and even as far south as Jacksonville, Florida, getting to the freezing line, but we're gonna have to watch it. It's gonna depend on how this evolves, and that's what we have going on. Now let's go ahead and get into snowfall real quickly. Let's go ahead and start with that. Here's the snowfall we have with this total snow accumulation. We have three models we can use: the GEM GDPS, the European, and the GFS. Here's the 0Z GEM GDPS. We'll show you the 12Z for context because we're seeing all of these runs ebbing and flowing, bobbing and weaving, and we're gonna have to watch the fluctuations. But the 0Z GEM GDPS has, a lot of lake effect snow, parts of Michigan, parts of New York, those areas right there. But generally for the Midwest, we're seeing anywhere from like 10 inches of snow for much of Illinois to as high as 2 feet of snow in parts of Kansas as this organizes and develops over there. And we're going to have to pay attention to that. And the 12Z is a little bit different. It's being a bit more aggressive, showing more snowfall. It's also having that rain-snow line push a little bit up further to the north compared to the 0Z. But still, over a foot of snow is possible for Indianapolis, St. Louis. Chicago's a little iffy. It's going to depend on how far north the snow will get. But by and large, we're looking at a pretty powerful system. Columbus, someone else asked me about that. This run has it getting a foot of snow, but pay very close attention because Ohio, it's hit, miss all over the place, and it really depends on the run. Because for the Euro, for example, is a little bit different. The 0Z Euro pushes this further to the south, which I'm going to be honest, I am a little skeptical of, mainly because I'm not sure how far south the jet's going to dig. I don't know what those height variables are going to be. I don't know too much about that. It's going to be more of a come back in a couple of days, and if you're in Kentucky, to see if you're going to get a lot of snow type of situation. But if you're in Illinois, Missouri, and other parts of the Midwest, yes, you are absolutely going to get a lot of snow if these models hold, and they will continue to hold, in my opinion, based on the synoptic setup and all those stuff. The snowfall totals, I do think, are a little bit exaggerated. For example, in parts of Missouri, we're looking at potentially almost 20 inches of snow near Columbia, Missouri. I don't think that's going to happen. Personally, I'm thinking a better estimate would be, I'd say, around a foot or so for a lot of these areas, but overall, quite a scary situation that we have going on. Here's the GFS right here. GFS has been pushing further to the south as of recently, which I'm going to be honest, I am very skeptical of. What is this? Like 9 inches of snow hitting Raleigh. I am a little skeptical of this because of the synoptics and because of those height variables. Like, for example, if you want snow at 850, your heights are probably going to be around, I'd say, 1350 or so at that height. And if we're seeing and based on what we're seeing with climatology speaking, I don't think we're going to get that low. I do think freezing rain is absolutely possible with this, but at this current point, I am skeptical of how far south the GFS is going, unless we're seeing more model runs that are a bit that kind of have something that we don't expect. So ultimately, more of a ebbing and flowing type of situation. The models are absolutely consistent on the amount of snow it's dumping. The problem is, where is it going to be going? Is it going to be hitting Chicago? Is it going to be hitting St. Louis? Is it going to be somewhere in between those latitudinally? We don't 100% know because we're still about 6 days out as of recording this video. But still, keep an eye on it. I'll keep you updated. And lastly, for the severe weather threat, I'm not going to really touch too much on the parameters of that because that is really far out. And we tried that yesterday. We couldn't get that much of a reading. But I do think severe weather is possible based on the forcing, based on the amount of moisture that's going to be generated from the Gulf. We're going to have to watch the synoptic setup as well. Severe weather has always been a bit more mesoscale, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. as well. But regardless of this is still a very big situation that we're going to have to pay attention to. I will, of course, keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. I hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's Eve as well. 2024 is coming to a close. I hope you guys had a wonderful year. I hope you have a wonderful 2025 going into it. Tomorrow is New Year's Day, which in my opinion is the most boring holiday of the year. You can let me know in the comments down below if that is accurate or not. Hey, I'll debate with that anytime, but with that being said, I'll close the video out right here. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Helps us get more people engaged with weather. Join the Storms United Discord server. Link will be in the end screen. We're going to be talking about this all week long, so stay tuned for that. Also, shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to support the channel more directly, be sure to join it. Link is in the description down below. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.